Hello, welcome to another episode of I'm Not a Math Person. Originally, I had planned on doing the next episode as multiplication with natural numbers and maybe a little bit of information with all integers and multiplication. But the last episode, I felt like I kind of dropped a ball on a little bit of the explanation. So I wanted to make another companion piece to episode 5 and do like an episode 5.2, but with a little bit more information and a little bit more explanation. So hopefully this is going to be a quick video, and I'm not going to do an introduction or an outro. So we are just going to dive right into it. So first things first. On the previous episode, I used a and negative a for to represent some number. And if we remember before, these letters are just representations of some number. We just want to put something there that represents a number, but no specific number, like 1, 2, 3, 10, 20, 100, negative 1,000, 3,000, negative 1 million. We don't want to put anything like that specific. So we write a letter down. And it could be any letter. It could be B, it could be C, it could be D, it could be Q, it could be a cross, it could be a wiggly, weird line going everywhere, it could be a weird face. It doesn't matter. We just chose the letter A. So the next thing I want to do, though, is what I did previously. I showed something like this, and then we did like a minus, a negative a equals something. So what I want you to pay attention real quick here is this part. So negative a in this, doesn't matter that it's a negative a. So what I'm going to put, like, because this could be either a positive a or a negative a. So I'm going to use this symbol as a plus, meaning positive, and then I'm going to write a line underneath as a negative. So what this means is it's plus or negative. So it's a plus or negative a. It doesn't matter if it's a plus, it doesn't matter if it's an a. It's just a representation of some positive or negative number. Okay, so now let's do this. So if we remember last episode, if we had some number that's a positive or negative, it doesn't matter. We just have some number here, some integer here, and we add it to another positive number. We're going to focus on this part. A positive, and we're adding a positive plus, and a plus sign is going to be a plus. So this is equivalent to plus or minus some number plus a positive number. The next thing we tried, let's do a plus or minus some number plus a negative number. And if we remember from our last episode, our plus and a minus or negative, two opposite signs will become a negative or minus. This is equivalent to plus or minus some number minus some number. Now, if we do plus or minus some number minus some positive number, if remember, since these are opposites, this is going to be a negative or minus. So plus or minus some number minus a. This is equivalent to this. Now the last one, plus or minus some number minus some negative number. And remember, since these are both the same, these are similar, negative, negative, minus, minus, and negative is going to be a positive because they are like signs. This is equivalent to plus or minus some number plus some number. These are all the same thing. These mean the same thing. Now what I want to do is do a little bit more examples of addition and subtraction with positive and negative integers. So let's take the example of we have a -3 minus a -1. Now, if we remember what we just went over and the previous episode, we have a -3, so we're not worried about this just yet, but we have two signs that are like. So, since they are like, there'll be a positive. So this equation is equivalent to -3 plus 1. Now, if we remember, another way we can look at this as a -3 plus 1, we can also write this down as 1 minus 3, or 1 plus -3, and then again the signs, since they're opposite, we'll get 1 minus 3. And again, now since we are in the realm of all integers, meaning we have all of our positive numbers and negative numbers, we can work this out. So let's use what we did last time, what we've been using. So we can break this 3 down as a -1 and also a -2, or -1 minus 2. Since we have a +1 minus 1, these two will cancel each other out. So all that's left is our -2. Okay, so now I'm going to do a series of problems using the same numbers, but I want to do variations of them, such as 1 plus 2, or -1 plus -2, or 1 minus -2, or -1 minus -2, and just so we can get the idea of what we are doing. So I don't want you to necessarily worry about the numbers themselves, but understand the process of what we're doing, because if you can understand the process of what we're doing, then we can work with other numbers, and other numbers will be less complicated since we understand what exactly we are doing. So first things first, now let's start with 2 plus 1. If we remember from our very second episode of addition and subtraction, or I'm sorry, addition with natural numbers, or now we know positive integers, we're adding two objects to one object, or one object to two objects, which gives us a 3. Now let's try 2 minus 1. We are taking 1 away from 2, which gives us 1. Now let's do something like 2 minus +1. This is the same thing as this problem. 2 minus 1, which is 1. Now let's try 2 minus -1. If we remember previously what we just did, since these two signs are like, this is 2 plus 1, which is the same problem as the first one, giving us a 3. Now let's get a little bit more complicated and do something like 2 plus -1. These two signs are opposite, so we can write this as 2 minus 1, which is the same thing as this one. Taking 1 away from 2 gives us 1. Now let's get a little bit more complicated and do something like -2 plus 1. Since this is a little bit more, this looks a little bit more complicated, let's try to make sense of it and do something like 1 minus 2. And since we have all integers at our disposal, we can make sense of this, as before we couldn't. 1 minus 2. So let's say 1 minus 1 minus another 1. These two will cancel each other out, leaving us with negative 1. Now let's try negative 2 plus negative 1. And if we remember from the early part of our last episode, we can treat these two integers, these two negative integers, as the same thing as up here, meaning we can do the same process, we can work them in the same process, but they have very different meanings and very different outcomes. So we can take negative 2 plus negative 1, which is negative 3. Another way you can write this, or you may see it at some point, negative 2 minus 1. And this will also give you negative 3. Now, if we remember from our previous episode, we know that 1 is less than 2 and 2 is less than 3. Whereas here in this problem, negative 1 is greater than negative 2 and negative 2 is greater than negative 3. Very different outcomes, but you can work them the same way. So now let's try something different that you may see. Negative 2, let's say minus negative 1. I haven't done that one yet. Okay, so since these are two like signs, negative 2 plus 1, or 1 minus 2, which is similar or the same problem as this one now, which gives us negative 1. Okay, so now what I want to do is take what we've been doing, these past few examples, and show what does this mean. So first, what I want to do is draw out a number line, or attempt to draw a number line, since my drawings are terrible. 1, 2, 3, 4. Little arrow here. And then keep going this way. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. Okay, so a couple of things I want you to take notice with this is it doesn't matter that these are evenly spaced for what we are doing, because this isn't a measurement. This is more of like, I want you to get the idea of what we are doing, and this is another way to show it. These arrows mean that this line keeps going. It's not stopping. This keeps going to infinity. This keeps going to negative infinity. That's why we write these arrows, to demonstrate or to show that it's going to keep going on forever. But in our situation right now, I only want to focus on these numbers. So let's start with what we were doing before, 2 plus 1. What does 2 plus 1 mean? What are we doing? So if we have 2 and we want to add 1 to it, let's move 1 space here. Because we are adding 1 to 2, we are moving 1 space over. That leads us to 3. And that's where we get here. That's our number. And if we remember from what we were doing before, when we are adding 1 chair to 2 chairs, that's the answer we get. So now let's look at the one of the problems that was a little bit more complicated for us, or I feel like that was a little bit more complicated for us, which was negative 2 plus negative 1. And if we remember, another way to write this is negative 2 minus 1. So what does this mean? Again, we have our negative 2 and we want to add a negative number. If we were adding a positive number to this, we would go this way. But since we are adding a negative, or we are subtracting a 1 from 2, we are moving further into our negative integers. So 2 and 1 space over gives us a negative 3. So what happens if we add 1 plus 3? Okay, so we have our 1, and doing the same thing what we just did with our adding 1 to 2, let's move 3 spaces. 1, 2, and 3. That leads us to 4, positive 4. And if we break this down and use the other methods we had used previously, we can come to the same conclusion that 1 plus 3 is 4. And I'd like you to try that out too on your own with other numbers. But let's look at this now. Go to our negatives. Negative 1 plus negative 3. And again, this is the same idea of what we were doing previously. We started out at a negative 1, and we're moving back 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. Negative 4. Now, I hope this seems a little intuitive to you, where it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, by all means leave a message or comment, and I can try to make another video to make it more, how do I say, maybe explain it in a different way. But I think this should cover it. Actually, let me do something else. Let's do something like 4 plus negative 6. And this may sound confusing to you because there is no 6 over here. There's no negative 6. But if we are going with the idea that we are using here, if we remember previously, 4 minus 6 is the same thing, and now we're in the realm of all integers. So let's keep going with the method we're just using right now with our number line, our infinite number line. So we have 4, and we're not adding, we're not going to the positive realm, we're not going this way, we are taking away 4, or I'm sorry, we're taking away 6. So what does this mean? We're moving 6 spaces back. So that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, landing on negative 2. Now, if we're not sure by doing this, if this is the right thing, well, let's just use what we've done before. If we took 4, and we know that 4 is in 6, so let's write this as 4 plus negative 4. And what numbers make up, or what can we add to 4 to make a 6? Let's say 2. If we did this positive, if we don't look at our negatives, we know that 4 plus 2 will equal 6. But now, since we are using negatives, these have to be negative. Negative 4, negative 2. Since these are the same numbers, they cancel each other out. 4 plus negative 4, or 4 minus 2. These will cancel each other out, which will give us negative 2, negative 2, which is the same thing as this answer. Okay, so that's it for this episode. I hope that brought a little bit more clarity. I went over the things that I definitely felt I should have gone over, such as our plus or minus some number. That was the main thing I felt like was a little bit confusing when I wrote down negative a plus or minus some positive or negative number. So here's a new thing we can look at. The new thing that we also went over is our number line. 0, 1, 2, negative 1, negative 2. And we know this line keeps continuing outward forever by these arrows. Positive, negative. And those are the only two new things we went over. I did a little bit more explanation with addition and subtraction with all integers, but those are the two new ideas I put in this video. I hope it made sense for this episode 5.2 of addition and subtraction with all integers. And again, like always, if you have any questions and or comments on how I explain things, if it does not make sense to you, please leave a comment or message me, and I can try to explain it in a different way so it can make more sense. But that's it for this episode. The next episode will be multiplication with all natural numbers. So until then, I hope this brought a little bit more clarity for you. I hope it alleviated some of that math anxiety for you. And I hope if you did understand this or you enjoyed it, I hope it helped you feel more like, in fact, you are a math person.